Welcome you who are marked for greatness. When jackals conspire to tear down a lion, they conveniently forget one thing: lions are not made in the image of lambs. What if I told you that the very cabal that schemed against you, the self-appointed arbiters of your fate who gathered in darkened rooms to orchestrate your downfall, have just received news that strikes at the very core of their being? Not the polite kind delivered on embossed stationery, but the raw, visceral kind that ignites panic, fractures alliances, and stains the eyes with a desperate knowing. Their meticulously crafted offensive, masquerading as a spiritual cleansing, did not merely falter. It recoiled upon them with a force they could never have conceived. Let's consider this historical truth. Every kingdom built upon the shifting sands of lies is destined to crumble faster than the echoes of the truth it sought to extinguish. The Roman Empire attempted to bury the undeniable truth of Christ's resurrection beneath a mountain of fabricated narratives. The accusers of Salem, blinded by fear and fueled by malice, condemned innocent souls as witches, until the very hysteria they fomented consumed them whole. Enemies drunk on their own perceived power consistently overlook a fundamental law of the universe. When you launch an unprovoked assault against the innocent, you are not simply contending with flesh and blood. You are defying the very immutable principles of justice itself. And let's face it, shall we? Your adversaries likely envisioned themselves as the architects of some malevolent symphony, a clandestine order whispering incantations, meticulously charting your demise. But here's the gut-wrenching reality they now confront. You were not a passive victim in their meticulously crafted script. You were the seismic plot twist that shattered their narrative beyond repair. So brace yourself for the unfolding drama. The very individuals who believed they had you trapped are now desperately scrambling to comprehend how you emerged unscathed, radiating an aura of invincibility. Their devastating news is not merely that you endured, it is that you transcended their machinations, operating on a plane of existence that defies their comprehension. They wielded trickery, but you commanded truth. They amassed numbers, but you cultivated discernment. They embraced hate, but you aligned with destiny. And the exquisite irony, they imagined they were exposing your weaknesses, but all they accomplished was a stark revelation of their own depravity. First, they plotted against the visible realm, but you responded from the unseen. They directed their attacks toward your physical form, your tangible assets, but you answered with the unwavering strength of the spirit. That is the reason for their utter desolation. When individuals scheme against you, they invariably underestimate the profound force that safeguards you. They fixate on the superficial, the readily apparent: your reputation, your financial standing, your relationships, your professional avenues. They operate under the flawed assumption that by severing a connection here or undermining an opportunity there, they can dismantle you piece by piece. But what they fundamentally fail to grasp is that your foundation is not anchored in the ephemeral realm of the visible. Your strength does not derive from the fickle approval of humanity or the fleeting nature of material success. You stand upon an unyielding bedrock that transcends their reach, the invincible power of the spirit. This truth lies at the heart of their agonizing frustration. They exerted every ounce of their limited human power to obliterate you. They circulated venomous gossip, desperately hoping to tarnish your image beyond repair. They manipulated circumstances, naively believing they could irrevocably sever your access to opportunity. They attempted to isolate you, anticipating that loneliness would shatter your resolve. But every assault struck only at the superficial layers of your being, failing to penetrate the core of who you truly are. They were playing the wrong game from the very beginning. Here's an undeniable truth. Deliberate attacks are impotent when the target is connected with a higher plane of awareness. While they were wielding the crude instruments of control, fear, and deceit, you were navigating the world with the refined tools of wisdom, intuition, and a divinely bestowed protection. That explains why their weapons, though seemingly sharp, ultimately proved dull and ineffective. They anticipated panic retaliation, or at the very least a perceptible wavering. Instead, you moved with a serene composure that defied their interpretations. And nothing instills more terror in an adversary than the realization that their most potent moves have failed to elicit even the slightest flinch. What further exacerbates their agony is this irrefutable fact: every single one of their attacks generated unforeseen and profoundly detrimental side effects. While they were targeting your physical being, those very trials and tribulations were forging your spirit into an instrument of unparalleled sharpness. What they intended to weaken you became the crucible in which your strength was refined. You cultivated heightened discernment, deepened your commitment to prayer, and embraced unwavering discipline. Their malice served as a spiritual gymnasium, fortifying muscles you were not even aware you possessed. And now they languish in stunned disbelief as the devastating realization dawns upon them that what they so desperately attempted to shatter has only rendered you more resilient. Their strategy was fundamentally flawed, rooted in the carnal realm. And you cannot defeat an opponent whose source of power transcends the limitations of the physical. That is why their inner circle is consumed by a gnawing restlessness. They have finally recognized that you were not merely surviving. You were strategically outmaneuvering them on a spiritual level every step of the way. Second, their onslaught was predicated on an obsolete version of you, not the evolved being you have become. Their attacks were launched against a phantom of your former self, and that is where they lost the war before the first shot was even fired. Enemies consistently rely on outdated intelligence. They cling to memories of who you once were, perhaps unguarded, possibly insecure, perhaps excessively trusting, and they mistakenly assume that you remain trapped in that former state. Their strategies were constructed upon the brittle foundation of your past vulnerabilities. They counted on you reacting in predictable patterns, falling into the same traps that ensnared you before, or succumbing to the same pressures that once brought you to your knees. But the most shocking revelation they now face is this: the version of you they sought to destroy no longer exists. That is why they cannot comprehend why their attacks failed to land. They believed that the same lies that worked in the past would retain their potency. They thought that the same manipulations that once tripped you up would still throw you off balance. They failed to account for your profound personal growth, for the transformative power of your trials. Your heartaches and your losses, which have sculpted you into someone they have never encountered before. You are no longer competing on the same playing field, and that realization fuels their deepest nightmares. They are futilely battling a ghost, while the authentic you has ascended to a realm far beyond their reach. It is akin to someone attempting to unlock a high-security vault with a key that no longer corresponds to the intricate locking mechanism. They persist in turning it, forcing it, growing increasingly frustrated with each failed attempt. But the tumblers have irrevocably changed, and the harder they push, the more glaringly obvious it becomes that they no longer possess access. That is the agonizing frustration that now consumes them. They are incapable of deciphering the reasons for their tactical failures, and instead of accepting that you have undergone a profound metamorphosis, they are engaging in bitter recriminations, blaming each other for the spectacular collapse of their carefully laid plans. The truth is that personal transformation is the ultimate defense. You did not merely survive, you evolved into someone unrecognizable to the obsolete strategies of your past. They meticulously calculated your perceived weaknesses, but they utterly failed to factor in your profound healing. They placed their bets on your lingering fears, but they did not anticipate your unwavering courage. They relied on your past silence, but they never imagined the emergence of your profound wisdom. And so while they remain trapped playing checkers on a board of yesterday, you are already mastering the complex strategies of chess in a vast and uncharted arena. That is the devastating news they have received. Their intended victim no longer exists. They targeted who you were, but who you are now is utterly untouchable. And that epiphany has left them paralyzed with shock, because nothing inflicts more pain upon a hater than the realization that they have been squandering their precious time battling a mere shadow. Third, the more they sought to bind you, the more you unlocked previously dormant gifts. Every attempt they made to spiritually confine you paradoxically triggered the emergence of hidden talents you were not even aware you possessed. That is the kind of unexpected twist that shattered their carefully constructed plans. They believed that their curses, their lies, their calculated manipulations would suffocate your spirit, leaving you gasping for air. But instead, those very pressures ignited dormant strengths buried deep within the recesses of your being. It is the paradoxical nature of being chosen for a purpose greater than oneself. What was maliciously intended to crush you ultimately becomes the very catalyst that elevates you to unimaginable heights. When individuals unleash attacks of a spiritual nature, they anticipate widespread destruction. They anticipate confusion, weakness, and despair to overwhelm their chosen target. But in your specific case, the very opposite occurred. Their malevolent energy forced you to delve deeper into your inner reserves, to draw upon reservoirs of power that you might never have accessed without the crucible of that intense resistance. You cultivated new and more effective methods of prayer. You learned to perceive the world with heightened awareness. You became more astute, more discerning, and significantly more difficult to access. They erroneously believed they were constructing a prison, but in reality they were inadvertently thrusting you into a rigorous training ground that unlocked levels of discernment and resilience they could never hope to rival. That is what ignites their seething rage. They confidently predicted that their efforts would mark the beginning of your irreversible decline. But instead, those very efforts served as a fiery furnace refining the pure gold within you. The more they attempted to confine you, the more your spirit expanded, breaking free from every self-imposed limitation. The more they sought to diminish your radiance, the brighter your inner light shone, illuminating the darkness that surrounded them. And the cruel irony for them is that they unwittingly became the architects of your profound transformation without ever intending to do so. They inadvertently contributed to your spiritual awakening. It is one of life's immutable laws. Pressure inevitably reveals what lies hidden beneath the surface. They applied pressure upon you, fully expecting you to shatter into countless pieces, but the pressure only revealed the extraordinary strength that resided within. They attempted to bind you with the chains of fear, but fear in turn unlocked the boundless potential of your courage. They sought to drown you in a sea of confusion, but confusion unlocked the path to crystal clear clarity. They attempted to bury you beneath the crushing weight of shame, but shame unlocked the doors to unwavering self-respect. Every chain they forged ultimately transformed into a key. Now they are left staring at you in utter disbelief. You emerged from the ordeal not merely unharmed, but imbued with extraordinary gifts that rendered you even more untouchable, and the most agonizing aspect for them is knowing that the very attacks they so meticulously invested in became the stepping stones that propelled you to unprecedented heights. They desired to render you powerless, but they inadvertently became the reason you discovered the true extent of your own inherent power. Fourth, they never considered that your survival would stand as irrefutable evidence of their utter defeat. They never once entertained the possibility that your continued existence would serve as the ultimate indictment of their failure. Every meticulously crafted plan they devised, every venomous word they whispered, every calculated move they attempted to execute against you was fundamentally designed to make you vanish, to silence your voice, to erase your presence from their meticulously constructed world. They confidently anticipated that you would bend, break, or flee in terrified retreat, erroneously assuming that their attacks would leave indelible marks that they could gleefully measure and display. But the harsh and undeniable truth they are now forced to confront is that none of it worked. You are not merely surviving, you are unequivocally thriving. Your survival serves as a glaring spotlight, illuminating their impotence, a stark reminder that all their meticulously crafted schemes were ultimately built upon a foundation of weakness masquerading as strength. What makes this even more humiliating for them is the undeniable fact that their weapons were never real. Their curses, their manipulations, their carefully constructed lies possessed only the illusion of sharpness. They were in reality hollow and devoid of substance. The strategies they employed to attempt to control you were nothing more than smoke and mirrors, illusions crafted to scare, confuse, and ultimately intimidate. They behaved as if the damage they inflicted was permanent and irreversible, as if you were inherently fragile enough to shatter into a million irreparable pieces. Yet here you stand fundamentally untouched in ways they cannot begin to comprehend. walking with unwavering and serene authority while they stumble in panicked disarray, desperately attempting to decipher how everything they so confidently believed would work ultimately failed so spectacularly. Your mere presence now serves as a profound form of retaliation. Every breath you draw, every step you take, every accomplishment you achieve serves as a resounding declaration that their power was ultimately insufficient. They so desperately desired to break you that even the most trivial sign of your continued existence now feels like a crushing personal defeat to them. They failed to account for the undeniable fact that some individuals are inherently built not to fold under pressure, not to succumb to relentless attacks, but to rise even stronger and more resilient in the face of adversity. Your resilience transcends mere survival. It is irrefutable proof that their assault lacked any genuine foundation, any real force behind it. Now their shock and frustration are compounded by the inescapable realization that the very thing they so desperately desired to destroy is the very thing that is proving their abject failure. You do not need to engage with them directly or retaliate in kind. The simple fact that you remain unshaken is already louder and more impactful than any words or actions you could possibly employ. Your very life has become the undeniable testament to the fact that their efforts were utterly wasted, that their schemes were ultimately powerless, and that you, against all odds and contrary to all their malicious intentions, have emerged as the undisputed victor. Fifth, they assumed you would engage in direct combat, but you chose to fight from a position of higher moral ground. They anticipated that you would meet them head-on, engaging in a tit-for-tat exchange, returning gossip for gossip, hex for hex, sinking to their level. That is precisely what they desired, a visible and messy conflict in which they could quantify your strength, and in their warped minds claim some semblance of victory. They envisioned you descending to their squalid depths, becoming entangled in the petty chaos they had so meticulously orchestrated, and granting them the perverse satisfaction of witnessing your struggles. But you refused to adhere to their predetermined script. You consciously chose not to respond on the same base plane on which they were operating. Instead, you fought from a position of higher ground where their crude weapons could not reach and their devious strategies could not penetrate. By resolutely refusing to engage with their toxic frequency, you fundamentally shifted the entire battlefield. While they expended vast amounts of energy plotting, disseminating lies, and attempting to provoke dramatic reactions, you moved with quiet determination, unwavering purpose, and strategic precision. Every attempt they made to ensnare you became a futile exercise in self-deception. They were flailing wildly at shadows, foolishly imagining they could strike something solid while you remained untouchable, above unfettered by their meticulously crafted schemes. They anticipated a confrontational showdown, but all they received was your serene elevation, which left them feeling frustrated, disoriented, and utterly exhausted. The brilliance of fighting from a position of higher ground lies in its ability to turn the enemy's aggression against themselves. Their concentrated energy focused on dragging you down into their mire only served to deepen their own entanglement in negativity, paranoia, and utter disarray. Meanwhile, you continued to move forward with unwavering clarity, unshakable purpose, and an unseen protection that they could neither predict nor counter. Every effort they made to provoke a reaction, to incite chaos, or to claim a hollow victory was squandered because you were operating from a space they could not even locate on their limited map. This explains why your continued survival and your undeniable progress now feel like such a profound insult to them. They anticipated the theatrical drama of a battle they could readily observe, and instead they are confronted with your quiet and steady ascendance. A tangible demonstration of power they are incapable of measuring or comprehending. You did not merely evade their traps, you rendered them completely irrelevant. You refused to engage on their level, and in doing so, you preserved your precious energy, safeguarded your spirit, and exposed the fundamental emptiness of their malicious attacks. By rising above their petty machinations, you transformed what was intended to be a devastating confrontation into a breathtaking display of your untouchable strength, leaving them utterly confused, deeply frustrated, and profoundly powerless. Sixth, their perceived unity was in reality their greatest vulnerability, not their strength. Their sense of collective purpose was never rooted in genuine strength. It was, in fact, their most significant weakness. They operated under the flawed assumption that by banding together, plotting in large numbers, and feeding off each other's shared bitterness, they could create an unstoppable force designed to dismantle you. What they fundamentally failed to recognize is that alliances forged upon the shifting sands of envy and malice are inherently unstable and ultimately doomed to fail. Every connection they forged was inextricably tied not to genuine loyalty or unwavering integrity, but to a shared and insatiable desire to witness your ultimate downfall. That kind of foundation can never provide lasting support. It is only a matter of time before the crushing weight of their own collective negativity causes it to fracture and crumble. Envy is a highly contagious disease, and within their carefully constructed circle it festered unchecked, consuming everything in its path. Instead of collaborating with clarity and shared vision, their collective thoughts were consumed by incessant comparison, simmering resentment, and a relentless pursuit of one-upmanship. Each individual's bitterness served to fuel the next, creating a destructive chain reaction in which suspicion and internal competition ultimately proved to be far stronger than any actual strategic planning. They were not genuinely working together, they were merely feeding each other's inherent weaknesses, and that ultimately rendered their carefully constructed group far more fragile than they were ever willing to admit. The initial cracks began subtly, a minor argument here, a seed of doubt planted there. But once those initial fractures appeared, the entire alliance began to unravel at an alarming rate. When individuals unite under the banner of spite instead of a shared sense of purpose, every minor conflict inevitably escalates into something far more significant and damaging. Decisions become chaotic and riddled with internal contradictions. Loyalties begin to waver, and fear rapidly replaces any semblance of genuine confidence. They were initially unable to see the disintegration taking place because their primary focus was obsessively directed towards attacking you. But their own intricately constructed system was imploding from within, threatening to consume them all. Their perceived strength in numbers was rapidly transforming into a chaotic circus of paranoia and pervasive mistrust. Meanwhile, you observed quietly from the sidelines, completely untouched by their escalating instability. Every attempt they made to coordinate their efforts against you ultimately backfired because their collective energy was fundamentally misaligned. The more desperately they attempted to synchronize their efforts, the more glaringly obvious their inherent flaws became, and the easier it became for you to maintain your position ahead of the curve. Their reliance on one another's collective bitterness created strategic blind spots and critical miscalculations that ultimately left them exposed and vulnerable. In the end, their perceived unity was nothing more than an illusion, a shimmering mirage of strength that vanished the moment genuine pressure arrived. While they were meticulously preoccupied with holding together a fragile facade of control, the very foundation of their carefully constructed circle was quietly rotting away. And you, standing apart from their chaos, emerged untangled and completely free from the inevitable collapse that they themselves had inadvertently engineered. Their consuming envy, their unhealthy dependence on one another, and their pervasive instability all combined to transform their greatest perceived asset, their sheer numbers, into the very instrument of their ultimate undoing. Seventh, they counted on instilling fear, but you thrived on divine revelation. They placed their faith in the power of fear to control you, naively believing that terror would weaken your spirit, rendering you compliant and easy to manipulate. Every carefully crafted scheme, every insidious lie, every whispered threat of intimidation was meticulously designed to freeze you in your tracks, to make you question your own judgment, to ultimately cause you to stumble and fall. That is the foundational method of attacks. Paralyze the intended target, cloud their ability to think clearly, and feed off the resulting chaos that the pervasive fear creates. But what they fundamentally failed to anticipate was the extraordinary capacity of your resilient mind and unwavering spirit to adapt and overcome. Instead of succumbing to trembling fear, instead of dissolving into a state of utter panic, you transformed their fear tactics into a powerful lens of unparalleled clarity. Every attempt to intimidate you became a valuable lesson in heightened discernment. The very forces they employed to exert pressure upon you inadvertently revealed their underlying patterns, their predictable methods, and their ultimate intentions. You began to perceive the repetitive cycles, the predictable moves, and the subtle weaknesses inherent in their deceptive attacks. What they anticipated would thoroughly confuse you ultimately served to teach you exactly how to navigate every seemingly insurmountable obstacle. Their fear-based strategies did not induce paralysis. They instead ignited a powerful surge of profound insight. Every veiled threat, every calculated manipulation, every shadow of impending danger served as a compass, precisely pointing you towards the next strategic move, guiding you safely around the meticulously crafted traps they so confidently believed would ensnare you. That is precisely why they are now consumed by stunned disbelief. They firmly believed that fear would effectively silence you, but instead it only served to sharpen your senses and fortify your resolve. They aimed to make you hesitate, to second-guess your every move, or even to surrender your hard-won peace of mind. But their tactics only reinforced your vigilance, deepened your awareness, and strengthened your invincible spiritual armor. What they anticipated would render you small, vulnerable, and fundamentally weak. actually expanded your understanding of the multifaceted battlefield. You did not simply endure the overwhelming fear. They inadvertently handed you the detailed map to every hidden corner of their insidious strategy, and you skillfully employed it to move freely and confidently while they remained trapped in their own self-created confusion. The irony is as sharp as it is undeniable. Every calculated act of intimidation that should have shattered you only served to elevate you to even greater heights. Every whispered utterance of dread became a radiant beacon exposing their own inherent limitations. They meticulously invested vast amounts of energy in cultivating fear, but fear in your capable hands transformed into profound revelation. And now, standing both untouchable and acutely aware, you have demonstrably shown them that their most potent weapon was ultimately powerless against a spirit that perceives with unwavering clarity, thinks with strategic precision, and steadfastly refuses to bend to their will. What they maliciously intended to serve as your greatest weakness ultimately became your most formidable advantage, leaving them frustrated, exposed, and soundly defeated. Eighth, they attempted to write your ending, failing to realize that you are the author of your own destiny. They endeavored to dictate your ending as if your life were nothing more than a story they possessed the right to control and manipulate. Every malicious rumor, every baseless accusation, every attempt to warp public perception was designed to shape your narrative in a manner that would unfairly favor their twisted agenda. They relentlessly spread carefully constructed lies, deliberately twisted undeniable facts, and fabricated elaborate scenarios, all meticulously designed to portray you as small, insignificant, fundamentally weak, or even defeated. They desperately wanted the world to embrace a distorted version of you that mirrored their own consuming envy, their simmering bitterness, and their elaborate schemes. But what they fundamentally failed to grasp is that you were never destined to be a mere character in their twisted story. You are and have always been the sole author of your own extraordinary life. Their futile efforts to control you were doomed from the very beginning, because your life is not dictated by the fickle whims of human opinion or the temporary sting of malice. Every time they attempted to force you into their carefully crafted narrative, you resolutely moved in ways that exposed their lies for what they truly were. Every insidious plot they concocted, every slanderous whisper they disseminated, collided head-on with the undeniable reality of who you truly are. Their attempts to fabricate a preordained ending for you ultimately backfired, because truth possesses an inherent power to resonate far more profoundly than falsehood. What they anticipated would confine you only served to highlight the stark contrast between their pervasive deception and your unwavering authenticity. The resulting irony is as sharp as it is undeniable. While they labored tirelessly to convince the world, and perhaps even themselves, that you were fundamentally weak or irrevocably defeated, your deliberate actions, your powerful presence, and your remarkable resilience told a completely different and far more compelling story. Their meticulously crafted script collapsed under its own weight, appearing flimsy and amateurish next to the undeniable proof of your flourishing life. Each carefully constructed lie became nothing more than a poorly written page of bad fiction, while your unwavering reality continued to write compelling chapters of triumph, clarity, and unyielding strength that they were utterly unable to erase or control. What frustrates them most deeply is knowing that no matter how desperately they tried, they could never dictate your ultimate destiny. You were never a character in their twisted story, never held captive beneath their manipulative pen. You move with unwavering freedom, guided by deeply held principles, inspired by a compelling vision, and protected by a higher power that they are utterly incapable of influencing, and every petty attempt to force a narrative only strengthened your position, demonstrating to the world that their shrill voices were ultimately empty while yours resonated with undeniable power. Their malicious plots reveal far more about their own consuming envy and inherent weakness than they do about you, and your life, untarnished and relentlessly flourishing, stands as the undeniable evidence that the ending belongs solely to the one who holds the pen, you. Ninth, their weapon of secrecy proved to be impotent against your extraordinary gift of discernment. Their meticulously chosen weapon of secrecy was intended to serve as their greatest advantage, but it ultimately proved to be impotent against your extraordinary gift of discernment. They believed that manipulative silence, strategic shadows, and hidden agendas would provide them with complete control over the entire situation. Every whispered plot, every clandestine meeting, every attempt to manipulate from behind the scenes was meticulously designed to keep you shrouded in darkness, fundamentally vulnerable and desperately grasping at straws. They operated under the flawed assumption that if they acted in secrecy, they could maintain a perpetual advantage, remaining perpetually one step ahead, while you floundered in the dark, desperately attempting to catch up. But what they fundamentally failed to comprehend is that authentic discernment possesses the extraordinary ability to perceive what calculated secrecy desperately attempts to conceal. You did not simply notice their carefully plotted moves, you understood the subtle patterns that underpinned them. Every hidden motive, every concealed intention, every veiled attack became glaringly obvious to you because you were inherently tuned to recognize the unwavering truth, even when it was meticulously buried beneath countless layers of calculated deception. Their reliance on shadows offered no genuine cover. Their silence was ultimately transparent. You possessed the innate ability to anticipate their next move before they even executed it, and that remarkable foresight granted you a level of control they never imagined you could possibly possess. That explains why they are now experiencing a level of frustration that transcends all measure. They firmly believed that strategic secrecy would both protect them and grant them significant power over you, but instead it only served to expose their inherent weaknesses for all to see. So to wrap it all up, remember this when faced with adversity and those who seek to undermine you. Your strength lies not just in surviving, but in thriving. It's about recognizing the power within you, understanding that their attempts to diminish you often reveal their own shortcomings, and knowing that your journey is ultimately authored by you, guided by your own inner compass and a higher purpose. You are not a victim of circumstance, but a force of nature. I hope this resonated with you. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your experiences, or any questions you might have. please drop a comment below and let's start a conversation. And if you found this helpful, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos filled with inspiration and empowering insights. Thanks for watching, for watching, for watching, for watching, for watching.